Hello and welcome to our series of conversations with men and women whose ideas, vision and philosophy define our contemporary world. My guest today describes herself as a journalist and an environmental activist. Her work in diverse areas of the environment have catalyzed actions in fields such as the question of air pollution in Delhi, CNG, the problems with groundwater, the pollution, the pesticides in drinking water, in soft drinks. Her passion, she says, derives from being like a dog after a bone. I'm delighted to welcome Sunita Narain, who's also director of the Center for Science and Environment. Welcome, Sunita. A dog with a bone. Where did that analogy come to you from?
Well, we're obsessive. And I think we've learned that, change is very desperately needed in this country, but change is really for the obdurate. It's for the pig-headed. And when we talk to my colleagues, and my colleague Anil Agarwal, who founded CSE, is to always say, don't give up. It will happen. But you have to remain very focused, and you have to desire that change. You have to want that change. And you can imagine with a lot of young people who work at CSE, at the Center for Science and Environment, it's very tough to keep them motivated and a sense that, yes, something can happen. And that's one of the reasons why this analogy, just don't give up. You're a dog with a bone.
You've also sort of reflected on the idea that, to stay inquisitive and keep asking dumb questions. Sort of the common assumption is that, we should really be asking the right, intelligent questions. Why the dumb questions?
Because I think the fact that you don't know enough is always the right attitude to know more. And I've learned that in my life. I mean, I learned my skills on the job, and my skills are really one of journalism. And I believe that the best journalism is one which just takes a cue and then works at it and keeps exploring as the questions come in. And I'll give you a classic example. When we did we set up a laboratory, as you know, to test pesticides. The first idea we had was, let's test pesticides in drinking water. Collected a lot of drinking water samples from Delhi, essentially couldn't find a trend. And we kept asking the questions, but we couldn't get the answers in terms of saying, which colony, where is it coming from, where do the pipes come from, where does contamination take place? So then we hit upon this idea that let's check bottled water. My colleagues tested bottled water. They found pesticides in it. First question was, where does the pesticides come from? Now, if we actually had assumed that we knew the answer, we would never have asked that question. The minute you ask that question, you start saying, okay, then let's check. We went back to the factories, collected raw water, checked that pesticide level, found profile matched. Same pesticides in the bottled water, same pesticides in the raw water. Clearly the pesticides were coming from groundwater. Second question, why did we find them? Government has a law, there are regulations for this, there are norms and standards. Why was it not checked? That's when we started investigating the regulations, and we found that the methodology that was prescribed for checking the quantum of pesticides was different from the one that we used. Ours was more sensitive. And so I've always believed with my colleagues and for ourselves is that really it's the inquisitive mind, it's the mind which seeks answers. And the minute you believe and you become so arrogant to say, oh, I know everything, and I've done this in, say, 50 years ago, or when I was the district magistrate, this was the way things happened. I think that's one of our biggest problems in our country today.
Your work has sort of so many elements. There is the element that derives from, as you said, passion to find out what the problem is, to find out the reasons and the causes for the problem, then to analyze them scientifically, technically, put them out into the domain through journalism, and then to try and bring about concrete change, because usually it's not enough to just put something in the public domain. It disappears. The activism that catalyzes change. Do you, when you're sort of looking at issues, think through these strategies and explore ones that may be more successful than others, or do you just go for the gut?
It's a mix of both, I'll be frank. I think we tend to go for the gut. We tend to just tumble along. As I keep saying, we're like we never know where we're going to reach. We tend to just go on at a particular issue. But yes, at a certain stage when we're sitting down with all the data in front of us, and my colleagues and I would have a brainstorming session, Definitely. At some point we would think about, because our interest really is to drive change, and that we remain very focused on. I remember when I once asked Anil many years ago that, out of frustration, we write so much, but we don't bring change, and what's the point of writing all these articles? And he said that, he'd had a conversation with Gunnar Myrdal, who, wrote the Asian drama many years ago, and asked him the same question. And Myrdal had said to him, think of your writings as a time bomb. That it's your job to write it and to throw it out. And that one day somebody will read it who will use it to make the difference. And at CSE, what we say now is that our job is to shorten the fuse. So it's the activism that we use. We write something, but then we also try and use our activism to shorten the fuse so that we can make that difference. And in that sense, yes, we do sit down and do deliberate on what we feel would make that difference. It works sometimes, it doesn't work many times, and that's part of the game.
This is something we've been guilty of, and you reminded us that each time you walk into an interview and after you sit down, people ask you for a cushion.
Yes, always.
So where does this diminutive person get her energy and get her passion?
It's difficult to say. I think that's life. That's the way we are. It's the challenges in front of you, and it's the sense of, it's the ability to see that you can make the difference. And I think every battle that you tend to win even a little bit gives you that energy to fight a lot more. And, also because we're not doing this for ourselves. We're really doing this in what we feel is a change that we can make for, in terms of pollution. I remember when we started our air pollution campaign, everyone said to us, forget it. Nothing changes in Delhi. Nothing changes in India. And what are you banging your head on the wall for bringing in compressed natural gas into Delhi? I mean, it's not going to happen. And I remember all of us just sitting back many a times and wondering, is this worth it? And yet, being able to persevere, being able to push for that change, you do have substantially lower levels of pollution in Delhi today. And a sense of achievement which goes much beyond CSE. And that's what makes me very delighted today, that it's the political leaders of Delhi who today say that, maybe if we worked a little harder, tomorrow it'll be even better.
You're watching a conversation with Sunita Narain, Director of the Center for Science and Environment. We'll be right back after a short break. Welcome back. You were talking about the feeling of satisfaction that your air pollution campaign has had in Delhi. How sustainable do you think this is?
It's a very tough question, Rajiv. I mean, when we started off our campaign, Delhi's pollution levels were very bad. You remember we were talking about RSPM, that's respirable particulate matter, which goes deep into your lungs, as high as 8 times above the national norm. It was going up and up and up. And when we started, we looked at both in terms of fuel technology, vehicle technology. We looked at bringing in gaseous fuel, CNG, because we said we would leapfrog. We would get as best as the Europeans or the Americans by jumping into a new technology. The battle was fairly intense. It's a question of we've never done this before. Nowhere in the world was CNG used in the scale that is used in Delhi today. We have 80,000 vehicles running on CNG. We have over 10,000 buses running on CNG. Even Beijing, which started its CNG program at the same time as Delhi, today we are ahead of them. And in that sense, today it feels like an achievement, but say, when we were doing this, the opposition was so intense because we've never done this. Nobody has ever done this. And so therefore, you're treading on grounds that has never been achieved. Now, that's really what the issue challenge is today. If you look at all over India, vehicle population is increasing. You're getting very poor technology on the roads today. You're getting very high levels of pollution. And the same thing in Delhi. 200,000 cars are added in Delhi's roads every year. Congestion is increasing. Obviously, pollution will also increase because we have large numbers of dirty cars on the road which we can't clean up. The challenge today again is to find another leapfrog. is to find that jump start ahead. And again, it takes the mind to be able to visualize that it's possible to do something which is absolutely unbelievable. And what we are saying today is that can all of India think, rather than going into cars, can we think about a public transportation mode of mobility? Can we make our cities, whether it is the Indore or the Delhi or the Pune or the Coimbatore, completely revisualize the city and think of it that today we don't have to go through the congestion tax of London. We don't have to visualize a dirty future. We can actually bring our cities into a city which is as modern, as convenient. And I'm not talking about lack of mobility. I'm not talking about the fact that, it shouldn't be convenient. But can we think of a model in which, the car becomes not the status symbol, but really the bus and the air-conditioned bus and the tram and the bicycle become the city of the future.
This is as much an ability of the imagination to leap forward beyond limitations as it is of what we ordinarily in everyday conversation feel bogs us down: vested interests, inertia. And I think the remarkable achievement of your work and that of CSE has been not only to make this leap of imagination, but to be able to simultaneously work on overcoming inertia and being able to combat and battle vested interests. What were some of these that came up on the battle for Delhi's environment?
It is bound to happen, Rajiv, and I'm not surprised at it. If you look at CNG or the air pollution, the lobby that we would work against is the entrenched lobby, as small as the issue of adulteration to as large as the issue of manufacturing. Okay, CNG is a fuel that could not be adulterated. So therefore, you had a whole group of people who had an interest in as minor a business as pilferage. And then, of course, you have the large interests, which whether it's the oil companies who manufacture the diesel, or the large companies who manufacture the vehicles, or just the sense of apathy that, it's just not possible to do so. And why are you bothering us? But my own sense is that the only way we can move ahead is to capture people's imagination. And when I look at Delhi, and I look also at our work today at water and issues of pesticide contamination, I find if we are able to garner the support of a large number of people and get them to rethink and get them to see this in their interests, it's difficult. And I know how difficult it is to reach out to a large number of people. And that's where the role of media becomes so essential, to not to follow people's opinions, but really to guide and to steer people's opinions. And I think that's really where all our work comes in, that, can you show this as alternatives which are as real and not as fanciful, not exotic, not bizarre, and not too radical, but really ones in which we can do everything that we are doing today, but we can have that quality of life that we all work towards. I mean, what's the point of talking about a modern India which remains polluted, poisoned, dirty, and wretched?
You talked about the need for a sustained effort in sustaining this aspect. Let's look at the issue of pesticides. There was a big explosion. Yes. It captured the newspapers. The JPC submitted a report. But it seems to be almost like business back to usual. We still see lots of soft drink ads endorsed by Indian icons. How have you felt? An anticlimax, perhaps?
I've been disappointed, I'll be frank with you. Disappointed at the lack of understanding that this is an issue that touches a lot of people in this country. Disappointed also when I've seen double standards of the same company. I don't know if you've been reading, but just last week there has been, or just recently, there has been news that in UK, a bottle was found of bottled water which had higher contamination of one of the soft drink companies, and the entire batch from across UK was withdrawn overnight. And therefore, it's very clear that if you have a tough regulator, if you have tough standards, companies are forced to comply. Public opinion matters. Over here, what you're seeing is that companies, whether it's the soft drink or, very broadly, there is a great sense of the regulator is apathetic. Regulator can be organized and sort of worked around. And public opinion is dismissed. And I think that is not very good for India in the long run, because as we get into greater levels of industrialization and economic growth, you will need the check and balance. And nobody is against growth and greater industrialization, but nobody is for poor health at that cost, lack of social equity at that cost. And therefore that check and balance becomes the role of the regulator, working with the broader civil society and public. And I'm not given up, so I must tell you this, that I think we will make sure that many of the recommendations of the Joint Parliamentary Committee, which I think are fantastic and really help to put that agenda for future health concerns, we will work at them. And that's my commitment to all the viewers, that we will be at it.
The way ahead. We'll be right back, continuing this conversation with Sunita Narain of the Center for Science and Environment. Don't go away. Welcome back. The way ahead. What are some of your planned challenges to the system?
The way ahead is very much the way of the past. I don't see any major changes. I think the crisis that is unfolding, and I think the biggest challenge for India today is the issue of water. And I'm very worried about what I see more and more, the more I travel across the country. Extremely worried at the kind of water destitution that you see. The lack of water at one end, which is leading to huge problems. On the other hand, water pollution, which is creating a new set of problems.
CSC has done pioneering work on water harvesting, and you
That's
provide
right.
models. And
That's right.
what are the possible payoffs from these?
Well, water harvesting is something that I think gives individuals a great sense of power. And at CSC, we're constantly looking for ways of linking people to the environment. Because at the end of the day, unless you and I feel that it matters to us, we are not going to bring change in society. Water harvesting is a technique which was not new to India. It's been the most age-old technique. You go to Rajasthan, Jaisalmer, you'll see the lakes and tanks of Jaisalmer. You had rainfall levels of 100 millimeters, but a town that has never been evacuated for lack of water. You go to Cherrapunji, a city, a settlement which has 14,000 millimeters of rainfall, 100 millimeters, 14,000 millimeters, and yet Cherrapunji has a water crisis. And therefore, the big issue for all of India is not just the quantum of water, but our ability to live with water, our ability to build that relationship with water. And water harvesting in cities becomes a very interesting way of doing so, because, as you know, most cities and households are today dependent on groundwater for drinking. Groundwater levels are really plummeting. I mean, Delhi's water levels are touching 300 feet today. Most other cities have destroyed their lakes, their tanks, their ponds, which are sponges for rainwater harvesting, for rain, and therefore their groundwater table is plummeting. So therefore, rainwater harvesting, which is literally what you can do to capture rain on your own terrace, on your own rooftop, on your own driveway, and to make sure that your lakes and ponds in your settlements are revived again, become one way of the community to build its relationship with water.
An important articulation of this has really come through the judiciary, hasn't it?
Yes,
that
absolutely.
the water is no longer the private resource of the person
That's
on
right.
whose land it occurs, but is actually a community resource. You've had the support, the interventionist support of the courts at numerous occasions, and this has happened. In India, fundamentally, efforts such as yours are seen as citizens' movements, of communities' movements, and the support of the judiciary, but the executive, the interests, the vested interests, the power structures are that much more difficult to impact. So you put this vocabulary, you put this discourse in the public domain, but isn't there frustration that the system is so slow to yield?
I wouldn't call it frustration. I think we have a tremendous sense that, I have a tremendous sense when I see the last 20 years of movement in India. I think it is going to be difficult, let's be very clear, because the vested interests are getting that much more stronger at one level. Also, we have never really concentrated on governance. In the last 10 years, the decay that I've seen on the state itself. The state instead of becoming stronger and more vibrant, has literally withered away. And if you look at the levels and the way we govern things at the village level today, it's pathetic. And I don't think we've ever concentrated on rebuilding the state as the regulator, as the one which would work in the interests of everyone. So yes, definitely, I think that's going to be one of the big challenges for India in the future.
And the vested interests have also become more globalized.
The vested
so they bring
interests,
together much larger...
I think the vested interests have become globalized. They've also been able to capture people's imagination. There is a great sense that if the public sector doesn't work, everything can be done by the private sector. And my own sense is that pendulum, which has sort of moved across, has to find its way somewhere to the middle again. And the state and its role as the public watchdog has to be sort of recrafted, in a sense, in modern India, in modern democracy. And that's where the role of the judiciary, the media, and the civil society comes in. I see us very much as a combined role of the state. And I personally have never seen us against governments. And in the last 20 years of working, I don't think governments have ever seen us against them either. So it's a relationship of healthy distrust.
And finally, you've described yourself as a one-time mediocre student, but who has brought over the years such great intellectual rigor to your work. And we've discussed sort of the future in some ways. Have you felt that you wanted to stay away from the issues and the crises in governance, which you may ultimately have to address, associate with, involve more proactively in the future?
Oh, there are moments of tremendous worry, and I get scared. I just feel that I should just run away. But no, I think Anil, who drove all of us for many years, essentially taught us never to run away. And I have dealt with the most technical issues with, as I said, a very dumb mind, in saying, well, if I don't understand it, I'll work very hard. And I think that's really the attitude. I know the challenges are huge, but I think the opportunity for change is equally huge. And the more I work in the field of environment, the more it is, as I said, that discovery of India, which shows you what is possible. And it's that mind, it's the use of that mind and the imagination. And if we can feel so excited, surely it is our job to make a lot of Indians feel equally excited about the possibility that we could build a water secure India, a just India, but yet also an economically prosperous India. And it's a challenge.
Sunita, thank you very much. You're an inspiration.
Sure. Okay. Thanks, Rajiv.